Well, yeah. So I'll speak to the audience that's here, but for those of you that know me, I'm an instructional designer here at MCC. My name's David Bentz. I came about 3 years ago, and as Naomi just said, one of the things that I've always found interesting is, especially in online learning, but I tend to see learning online and face-to-face having lots of similarities. So I don't try to make too many distinctions between the modality because I think the importance of what we deliver usually is pretty much the same. There are some differences in modality, but if we look at and think of teaching as kind of just one aspect of the learning process, I think it's best to look at it sort of without the modalities. But be that as it may. So I'm going to talk today about teaching presence. And again, it's one of my passions. One of the things that I like about it, or that I think it's sort of beneficial for, is it balances out, especially at MCC, when we talk a lot about quality matters or the MCC course design standards. Those are things that, are fairly scripted and, benchmarks that we'd like to make. But teaching presence also gives you, the educators, sort of the opportunity yourselves to add all of that other stuff into the course that makes it unique to you. So I want to give you guys permission to make your courses more unique. So obviously follow the MCC course standards and make certain that you do that, but also put your own personal flair into the course. And there's good reason for that, because in a second, I'm going to show you that there's some evidence, and it's been out there for quite a while, especially in online courses, that students really respond much better and their learning outcomes are better, primarily if you project yourself into the classroom and make the students feel comfortable and more sort of at home. So let me move on to the next slide. And I talked about some of this, but teaching presence or instructor presence in your course adds really to the self-efficacy of the students. So if you bring down that barrier between the student and yourself, and students oftentimes see the educator sort of as the center of the room and the person establishing the rules of engagement. If you can make yourself relatable, or the students feel comfortable or get a sense of who you are and have it be a little bit more relaxed, that tends to increase their opportunities and their sense that they can also ask questions. They can be uncertain about things, that they have an opportunity to, seek out more information, maybe in different kinds of settings. Some students are extroverts, some students are introverts, and if they feel like the course is sort of sterile or scripted, that they don't have that opportunity, or they may be hesitant. So teaching presence is sort of the foundation of building that, personal self-efficacy and a really good sense of belonging. And a lot of the research that I do and a lot of the stuff that I read about really goes along with this, social acceptance, social belonging, that sort of stuff, and how that relates to the students and how that relates in terms of their, feeling good about the course and feeling good about themselves in their venture to get a career or to go back to school and learn a new task. There's also been evidence out there that, course satisfaction levels go up, and when course satisfaction levels go up, then student outcomes tend to be much better. And then also, like I said, students gain a greater satisfaction just in general, that they're in the right process, or that they're moving along in the career path that they want to go to. And I'll give some tips. I've got about 6 different areas that we'll talk about in terms of how to increase your teaching presence. We'll get to that in a second, but I wanted to go over some of the research that I did some years ago, where I asked students what they wanted in their courses. And it wasn't just online courses, but it was, students of all flavors, face-to-face, online, hybrid, all of that kind of stuff. So when I did my research, and this was 2009 or so. So it's been, a few years now, probably 13, 14 years. But I asked over 1,000 students, both undergraduate and graduate, what it was that they felt was, from their instructor at least, what were some of the most important things for them. And the number one thing, and I think most of you probably know this one, this is pretty obvious, right? They want an instructor that communicates well, that has an opportunity to relate to them, but communicates, things that they need to know about the course, not just the teaching materials. But I just touched on this a second ago. Also, number two was disposition, right? So that you have a good disposition, that you're not cranky, that you're not grouchy, that you're approachable, that you're sort of have a sense of empathy and understanding for them. And then clarity. And I'm not gonna go through all of these, but I think you can see on the list. So clarity, when we talk about clarity, that means, gives good instructions, has clear instructions in the course. Students don't have difficulty figuring out what's due when and those kinds of things. Materials, so they like their courses, and specifically an online course, it is in this case well-designed materials, but that also goes for face-to-face, right? So they know when we're making maybe a material change, or that you've got the course well-designed so that they understand, maybe in a rubric, that this is a reading event, and then they're going to have some other event, that the materials are organized and students don't have trouble figuring those out. And then obviously they want feedback and facilitation and some of these other things, right? Some of the ones at the bottom tend to be more for online courses, like ease of navigation, things like that. But also students, and I've always found that this is kind of unique because I need it. They want reminders, and they want their instructor to be understandable. And when we talk about understandable, specifically in this context, students wanted someone that speaks English clearly. So many of them in this research talked about how they have maybe adjunct instructors who are from, different cultures, and they may have a little bit of an accent or some kind of a little bit of a dynamic there where they may have some trouble understanding the instructors. So understandable is different than a well-designed course or understanding, the materials. Then in this slide, these were just specifically undergraduate students. Again, both online and face-to-face. You can see, I'll go back and forth here. You can see a lot of the similarities between the two, but facilitation and feedback sort of goes down the list when we're talking just about undergraduates. So certain age groups, I think, have a different perspective, or where they're at in their career path in terms of their educational path. They want things more kind of, I guess, defined for them, laid out for them. And then as they get a little bit older, maybe they're a little bit more independent. So a lot of these things are sort of the same thing, but there were just some moderated differences. Now, the next thing that I wanted to talk about was the Chickering and Gamison research that was done. This was done well over 30 years ago, but it still really holds up. And one of the things was these two researchers, Art Chickering and Zelda Gamison, they took a meta-analysis research where they looked at all of the written research on good practices and good teaching principles, those kinds of things, over 50 years worth of research, and they distilled them down into 7 sort of actionable items that probably make up, a good classroom or good teaching practice. And I call these myself, these are kind of the 7 commandments. I used to have a poster of this, when I worked with faculty, kind of behind my desk, because all of these things, as you look at them, I mean, they seem to make sense, right? They're all very common sense sort of things. But these things are all things that we'll talk about, and we'll give some tips and techniques on maybe how to add some of these and address some of this. But to me, this is something like, if you're going to teach in higher education, it would be really good, and this is just a very short article. It's a 2-page article that describes this, but these 7 principles, I think, are things that a lot of times we don't relate to our faculty when we're talking about, making a good course, either in Canvas or in face-to-face instruction, right? That makes sense. So encouraging student to faculty contact, we talked about that. That's that communication, bullet point. Encouraging cooperation with students. One of the things that we want to do in all of our classroom settings is get students as quickly as possible relating to each other, right? Again, I mentioned that students typically on the first day of class, whether it's online or face-to-face, they're waiting for the instructor to sort of orchestrate what the environment's going to be like, what the rules of the road are. But then what we want to do is we want to try to navigate that and kind of disperse that so that we have students working with other students and feeling comfortable in that environment working with other students. Because we find that when students work together, the learning levels and retention go up. And then again, encourage active learning, which means, having them do lots of different things, help providing them with work examples, maybe gamification, things that make learning fun rather than rote. Students want feedback. I don't know any more better way to say that. We have an axiom in education that goes, like a quiz or a test or assessment without feedback really isn't an assessment, right? The feedback is the part where students learn what it is, where the gaps are, what their gaps are, or how to fill in those gaps. So feedback is really, really important, and giving it promptly so that they can make that connection, so they don't lose that time or that temporal period where they can make those corrections themselves and deepen their knowledge in that. And then obviously we want to emphasize time on task. There's a certain time to do the things that you need to do. You need to work on helping them with time management, right? So giving them either tips or tricks that maybe you learned when you were an undergraduate or when you were learning, going to college. A lot of students come to school and they don't have very good study habits. So emphasizing time on task and maybe how to utilize their time most appropriately and modeling some of that behavior also helps students. And then communicate those high expectations. This is the reason why you got a B, not an A, or why you got a C instead of a D. What are those principles in your teaching that facilitate these high expectations or relate those things? Oftentimes, the answer to a lot of those kinds of questions that students get, or a good way to model that, is to just talk about how it is in the career field that they're going into, right? Give them some anecdotal stories about, well, if I don't have high expectations for you now, you may have trouble in your own profession if you get a degree or you get a certificate. So I think some of that is kind of self-evident, but again, anecdotal stories make the education process, actionable and relatable to them. And then respecting diverse talents and ways of learning. We don't all learn the same. You hear a lot of people say, well, I'm an auditory learner, I'm a visual learner, or, I'm a tactile learner. Think about those things as you design your course, design your learning objectives, learning outcomes, classroom activities, all of those kinds of things. The students that you have may not learn in the same way or as quickly as you did, even though their interest level in the course may be as much, or their career fields that they're going into may be as much as yours, if not more. They may just have a different set of ways that they work to impart knowledge. And so understanding that and maybe giving them opportunities to do things like assignments over, maybe in a different way, but for the same grade, instead of a multiple choice, quiz or test, you could say, write me a paper and cover these kinds of things. There's just just having that sort of broad-based understanding and allowing students to sort of have the opportunity to make their way into the educational process, I think, and being understanding of that goes a long way. So ways to improve your teaching presence. And these are some of the 6 things, and I'll have slides on each of these and give some examples. To do this would be to increase your synchronous sessions. And so this may not apply as much for face-to-face live courses, but I think it also does have some application, right? So have maybe opportunities outside of classroom for students to have a synchronous opportunity with you, whether it's by Zoom or, private meetings, things like that. But again, in online courses, we find that students prefer to have synchronous sessions. However, oftentimes the way that the online courses are structured or that they're written or designed, they're supposed to be asynchronous. But if you can find opportunities for synchronous sessions or opportunities to meet with them, one-on-one and in small groups, they really appreciate that as well, even though the course may be designed to be asynchronous. Provide classroom introductions, not only for yourself, but for the students. That sort of breaks that barrier that I talked about. That also gives you the opportunity as an instructor to, not be the head of the classroom all the time, right? So that it's a shared environment, not an environment that's entirely led by the professor, where the students are sort of looking to you to meet out what the next set of expectations or assignments or materials and objectives are going to be. Provide that clear communication. I can't say it any more clearly. I think it's resounding in everything that I've showed you so far, that not only do students want that, but in the Chickering and Gamison 7 principles it's mentioned. Try to, if it's written communication or spoken communication, try to really think about it and process it so that it's the most, attainable for them and understandable. Give regular, timely feedback. Once again, that was in the Chickering and Gamison, set of research. I think it came out in the research that I did. And the research that I did is just a small piece of research in online education. There's all kinds of online research that says sort of the same things. I think you see it when we use the MCC standards that are based on quality matters. That's brought into that as well. Facilitate and model learning, right? So this is demonstrate as much as you can what it is that students are going to be tasked with. They like to watch and see and do sort of things after it's been modeled to them. The other thing, if it's a classroom that maybe is different and that's not something that you could do, like a writing class or something like that, give work examples, right? So this is how I would solve this problem. And you can have anecdotal problems or give students, at least 2 or 3 models of something, maybe even on a quiz or an exam, so that they sort of get their mind into the right set of, frame. And then make your course personal. And we'll talk about that here in a little bit. So in these synchronous sessions, like I said, students prefer face-to-face instruction. It's been, well researched. So try to get in front of your students as much as possible. Make yourself available to them as much as possible, either in class, outside of class, at break time. If someone needs to speak to me, I'm available. They want to be able to approach you in the manner that they need to, when they need to, rather than feeling like, well, I don't know if it's okay to talk to my instructor or if I should ask those kinds of questions. Maybe, again, maybe they're introverted or a little embarrassed, a little reserved. Maybe there's some speech impediments. We don't know. There are all kinds of challenges that students have where they don't ask questions when necessary. So the more you can make yourself available and give them hints and opportunities that you're available to them, the less likely they are to be resistant to that, and hopefully will approach you. Again, office hours, I mentioned this too, homework help, review sessions, things like that, always help the students, again, feel as if there's a connection between you and them, and that the learning environment is sort of a community environment. So provide classroom introductions. And we talked about this a little bit, but teacher introductions, and this is one, and I think we'll talk about it some more toward the end. This is one where I really encourage people to make videos of themselves, even if it's a face-to-face course, make a video, put it in your Canvas course, so that students, again, get access to that and remind themselves and see for themselves that you are approachable. When we talk about people meeting each other, so when you and I and others first meet someone new, it only takes like milliseconds for us, just because of the way that our brains are wired, to make an assessment or to make judgments already about the people that are in front of us, right? So make some note of that, and make some opportunities to sort of allay any fears or any senses of barriers that students might have, that you're not approachable. In those introductory opportunities, you might want to tell in the classroom an anecdotal story about yourself in your career path or in your educational process, that will help for them at that stage relate to the materials that you might be teaching. In an online course context, in a video, I will often recommend that people not make a very formal video, just use, like your device, and make a video while you're out walking or in some comfortable environment, so that students get a sense that you're a person too, and that you're not some authority figure, but you're, again, relatable. Have students do their own introductions, right? We talked about some of that. Again, that gets students thinking right away that this is going to be a group opportunity, or that these social barriers are going to be broken down, and that you're going to facilitate a course that has lots of engagement with students to student, as well as student to teacher. So having them do those introductions, but you can also do introductions that are sort of a pairing thing, where it's a group exercise. One student relates to another student, who they are and what their interests are, and then that student has to introduce, the other student or their partner. There's also some ways that you can use technologies, and we have, I think at MCC, Flipgrid. So I don't know if any of you have used Flipgrid, but that's an opportunity, again, for students to make just small, short recorded videos of themselves, and then share those within the classroom environment or in Canvas. And then again, we want to use breakout rooms, things like that, when we're doing the exercises. And I think that, when we talk to students about their feelings of engagement, really setting that tone on the first 1 or 2 sessions that you have with them is critical. So the next one is, we'll go to communication, providing those clear communications, like I mentioned. This is just some techniques that I think work well. Students really respond well and feel like there's a connection between them and their instructor when they're called upon by name. So in the live classroom, that really is helpful. But how do you do that in an online environment? Well, mentioning their name in any kind of feedback, like, David, you did very well on this, or David, you need to make some improvements in this area, or maybe you didn't understand this, and providing some examples, those kinds of things. Also, you may want to try to use video in Canvas. So again, I think this is applicable for live and online courses. So video or audio feedback rather than written feedback or commentary, through SpeedGrader. There's opportunities in SpeedGrader to do both video and audio, as well as written feedback. That's helpful for students, and seeing your face and having you communicate to them, or hearing your voice again, has been found in research to be more meaningful to students than just written feedback. Frequent check-ins with students. So if you find a student that's struggling, or that you think maybe in the live classroom, as you observe your classroom environment, maybe a little disengaged or has a sense of confusion, and you're seeing some of this in their grades, potentially having a check-in, check up on them, make sure that they're all right. You know, students have personal lives just like we do, and their struggles, and I think they respond well to instructors that have a sense of caring for them. They go that extra mile. So, and again, you can do that in your online and face-to-face environments. And then provide direction, as I mentioned, and then work examples. So a lot of times in research that I've been reading, students who have, you know, multiple work examples for things that might be difficult really is helpful, because it helps model sort of the behavior, and it sets for them an idea of what the expectations are. So we've done that. We've all sort of done that. This is what a student work looks like. This is maybe a really good example of someone else's interpretation or way that they solve either this problem. That gives them sort of hooks and levers in their own actualization of learning, and helping sort of clear away some of the cognitive dissonance that they have on how to figure things out, or, you know, which ways to proceed. So that's very helpful. Give regular and timely feedback. We talked about this. I know MCC talks about 48 hours in our standard course syllabus, but students really want it much sooner than that. 48 hours would be probably at the very top end. Students need feedback within 24 hours. And I talked about sort of that prompt feedback before, where if there's a latency between the time that the student does an action, or, you know, has done an assessment, and the feedback comes much later, they lose a lot of some of that opportunity to make the learning much more imparted. So, and I think, you know, when you look at faculty members that maybe struggle with their evaluations, that's one of the areas that we commonly see is I felt like I wasn't getting feedback as quickly as I needed, or those kinds of things. And I know that grading, especially for faculty members that take grading quite seriously, and they do a lot of, you know, sort of illumination in their writings or their feedback, it can be arduous. It can be an arduous task to get it back in time for students, or in the manner that students want. So not picking on you, I'm just saying, you know, keep that in mind, try to be as expedient as you can. Another place to kind of, you know, shift some of this stuff is to set up a discussion board that offers to students kind of a communal environment. So it may just be a discussion board that allows students to just talk about the course amongst themselves. And there's various different strategies that you can use. One of the strategies that I like, that I've seen faculty use, is where you tell them, hey, I'm going to make a discussion board in Canvas, and this is for live and face-to-face courses, and I'm not going to go in there as the instructor. So it's a private place for students to sort of, you know, gather and have opportunities to speak freely. And then the converse, right? So set up a Canvas discussion board where you will go in. And so if there are questions or things that need clarity, either students can help each other, or you can go in and set that clarity for them. And then again, projects, we want to have frequent reviews, checkups before due dates. So as an instructor, you know, how's your project going? Where are you guys at? You know, it's due in 2 weeks. Do you have an outline? Let's take a look at that outline. Let's maybe jump on a Zoom session and all meet, that kind of stuff. Again, interjecting yourself sort of into the learning, not letting them be just completely autonomous and on their own, figuring things out. Oftentimes students may go in wrong directions, so monitoring some of those directions and getting a sense of where they are in their learning path, I think is critical as well and helpful. in establishing that relationship between your students and yourself. Facilitate and model learning. We talked about this before. Give work examples. One of the things that I really push when I work closely with faculty and developing online courses, but as well face-to-face courses, and I think is very useful, is to tell a story or tell a series of stories about yourself in what it is that you're teaching and how it impacted you, whether as a student or in real life scenarios. So some of the examples that I've done this with has been when I worked in medical education. I would have doctors and nurses oftentimes relate some of the more gory details or sort of the situations where it was a no-win situation, or situations where it was quite dire and they were able to, take a bad situation and make it good, or make it as good as possible. Students are coming to us and they're taking a risk, right? They're taking a risk on the career that they're choosing. Now, your course may just be an English course and it may be a part of their process or their general education requirements, but it's also meaningful for them in terms of why is that an important course, in their curriculum, right? Why do we have gen ed courses? We want to make them productive citizens. We want them to be able to write, do basic math, take orders, those kinds of things. And so give them ideas and examples of what it's like in the work-a-day world, because they don't have those experiences, right? They're coming to the course or coming to their program sort of with an ideal that they're going to be something when they're done, but they don't know exactly what that is. So the more you can relate sort of those realities and why the education or what it is that you're teaching is relating to what they're going to be doing in their professions, really helps them broaden for them, and really encourages them to feel as if they have the opportunity to make it and that they've chosen the right career, and get excited about what it is that they're venturing toward. Again, discussions, you can have discussion, either face-to-face discussions in your classrooms. You can have discussions outside of classroom, formal or informal. You can have those discussion boards, like I mentioned, that you could set up in Canvas that are monitored or unmonitored. And then, some of this stuff sort of repeats, but video directions. So students may read one thing, but they hear another thing. So giving students both written and video directions, or audio directions, and then as I mentioned, that correction and feedback in sort of video and audio is helpful, especially when you combine it with written feedback. It makes it much more concrete for them. And then lastly, again, it's those project check-ins, right? How are we doing? Where are we at? What are you struggling with? What do you feel comfortable? What do you feel confident about? Now, how to make your courses more personal. Recognize that your achievements are just as well as your students' achievements, right? Make certain that students understand that when they finish a course, or that they have this course nailed down within their program, that they're building to something, right? And that they have an opportunity to see learning as a building block, or an addition to where they want to go, rather than the end point. So a lot of students feel as if they fail a course, then they're going to fail their program and they're going to fail out. Oops. But make certain that they understand, no, this is just a part of the process. We have to get you through, and then at some point we let you graduate, and then you get out into the career field. And that was something that you've already done. So make those things relatable. See your students as individuals. I know this is difficult, especially if we have a large group of students, or you're teaching a lot of courses. Try to put yourself in a mental framework to remember when you're grading, to even just try to remember the student's face, or maybe something that they said to you. Individualize it as you relate to them and make communications with them. Create a classroom discussion, time or space. Again, we've mentioned that several times. Provide students with pictures. there's evidence out there, and this is evidence that goes back to the early 2000s when we were using, little ASCII characters like the little smiley face and those kinds of things. Emojis and smiley faces and things like that actually have an impact. Students have, in research, responded more positively to feedback with an emoji than feedback that was just text-based only. They feel as if there's a connection between you, the educator, and themselves just by little things, little details like that. So some of this stuff, again, we've covered it. So pictures, video, ask students for their pictures and videos, be interested in their personal lives if you have an opportunity to have conversations. And then those anecdotal stories that I mentioned, those I think are some of the things that I push the most heavily, because again, it gives students a concept of where they're going, and it also helps you be more relatable to them and be open to those differing ways of learning and how students communicate. So that was it. I know it was a lot and I just kind of rambled, but I wanted to have a discussion, or at least have an opportunity to talk about some of these things, maybe techniques that you're using or things that you've come up with, or maybe something that you learned from what I mentioned. Questions, comments?
Thank you very much for all of that. And there's a lot of things that you mentioned in here that I do, but then there's things that you've mentioned that I really I fall flat on. And why I'm here, and it's establishing that teaching presence and online courses. I mean, that's just a different. I know there's similarities, as you mentioned in the beginning, but I just struggle.
Well, yeah, and I think the students do too, right? So we have to kind of remember that we're all, and this is not ideal, this temporal distance that we have. I mean, video and Zoom have helped, but it's still not the same, right? And so I don't know. I mean, Leon, I don't know, this is again, one of the things that I want to give you is permission to be carte blanche to experiment with a lot of this stuff, right? So experiment with, and I think you did talk about in your shell share, experiment with those discussion boards, right? Allowing a place for students to feel comfortable and safe communicating with each other, and then maybe just with you. So, giving them an opportunity to just have personal one-on-one time. And if you sense, you kind of have to use, this is the kind of, I guess, the black art of teaching. We can give you the MCC standards, which are really sort of, rote and kind of a nice scaffold to build a good course. But this is kind of stuff that you sort of have to play with and learn and be inquisitive about. The variables change every term, right? Because the classes always change. We have different students. So again, I'm giving you permission to try a bunch of these things. They may seem like it's more work, but in the end, I don't think that it is, and I think it makes courses more palatable or digestible for students, even if it's, like I said, part of their program that's not the funnest part. That if you're an auto mechanic, you want to just wrench on motors. You don't want to write English papers and things like that. But yeah, I think that's it. I think you just have to be inventive.
Yeah. And sometimes my creativity is lacking, I think. It's, there's in the day I only have so much like brain space. And then it's like, oh, now I have to be creative. But there's I'm always experimenting with my classes, and they're constantly changing, and I think it's discussion boards are one of them. But this is kind of an idea that I was given by a colleague, and I'm going to try it next quarter, and I'm excited for it. It's such a simple thing. Is in Canvas how you can, you go through like a module, right? And but it's sequential, and the student actually has to like mark it as complete before they can go on to the next one, I think. You're nodding in validation. It's like, yes.
Yes, yeah, absolutely, yes.
And because I felt like a lot of students were just kind of hodgepodge, just like jumping around maybe within the module and overlooking the discussions or the discussion reminders that I would have, or even like the videos that I would make. And nothing's more like disappointing when you go into VidGrid and you see one view. Like, oh no, you've only one student watched my video.
Yeah, but wait a second, give yourself a little credit there, right? Because
How?
that's one student,
Yeah.
right? But that student might go out and be whatever, right? They may
Yes.
be the student that you're most proud of.
Yeah.
So again, and
And
that's that part that says see the students as individuals,
okay.
right?
Okay, I love your optimism, because for me it's disheartening, and it's like, okay, do I do the videos? But then like you said, it's like, hey, someone it help if it's helping someone, right? Okay. It's like
I
I don't want
talked oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say I don't want to I feel like I'm tricking my students to watching my
Well, wait a
videos.
second. Let me flip it here. So you're the only faculty member that showed up today, right? How am I supposed to feel about this?
Hey, it's being recorded and you can go back and watch the recordings.
But you know what I mean? I don't feel
Yes.
bad. I know there's gonna be others that watch it. We have this on, now recorded.
Yeah.
And I'm getting to talk to you one-on-one. Like, think how great that is.
And like look at all my little notes. I could have gotten a bigger piece of paper, I suppose. But
So don't, try to remind yourself it's not about the numbers. And
okay.
that's that separate, that's where this part of teaching is completely separate from quality matters and the rubric. It's this black art that's sort of over here that we all get into teaching for a reason, right? We want to help others. And if you're reaching them, that's important. You should feel good about that. You should.
That makes me feel a lot better. Naomi, were you gonna share?
I was going to give you a little something that I learned from an English instructor at the beginning of the quarter. And I think it covers both in having your personality and also encouraging students to watch the video.
Mhm.
And this faculty member started putting in little Easter eggs, they called them in the video, and kind of setting students up like there's a little treat in there for you, there's a little prompt in there for you. And one of them was they just said, like, send me a picture of your cat or your pet or your child or something. And then they got a lot of great pictures and just established that little connection, right? And they were able to kind of figure out who had watched the video and who hadn't. And when students hadn't watched it, they said, oh, didn't you know that the teacher asked you to send a picture of the pet? It wasn't a big deal, but it was just kind of fun and made for some good conversation. And if you want to go more technology based, you can of course put in questions in VidGrid.
Right.
They have to answer to go on, and then you might say there's a grade for that if you wanted to, a few points.
Well, and one of the other things that I want to cover here, I sort of ran through very quickly like lists and examples, but the other thing that I want to mention is a lot of our students come to us in higher education. It doesn't matter if it's community college or state college, private institutions, and there's a lot of them, probably more than 2/3, I would guess, that are uncertain that they belong there, right? They're uncertain about where they're gonna finish in 4 years or when they're done. They're uncertain, am I up to the task? Do I belong in college? And when we talk about our minority students, that's even worse, first generation. So these are things that we're doing to help assuage that, or welcome them to this environment. That, yeah, there are going to be times that you're going to be uncertain. There are going to be times that you're going to be, disappointed with your performance, or that you didn't quite understand things, or that you that you're not catching a hold of the information, but I'm here to help you. You know, those are big teaching presence moments. And that part that I talked about in the beginning of having students working together is very good at also being another tool of breaking down those barriers of I don't belong here. Students have the opportunity to meet other students who also may feel like I don't belong here. So they feel as if like there's a camaraderie. Oh, you feel that way too? And if you relate, you know, those personal stories, like when I started, I didn't know what I wanted to do. You know, this was my journey. This is how I got to where I am. And I'm excited that you want to have a journey and that you want to be somewhere. But if there's some realities that are going to happen for you, and sort of lessening that blow. Personal self-esteem is a very big issue, as you guys all know, especially in community college settings, because so many of our students, especially in the technical areas and the trades, feel as if sometimes that those are not careers that are dubious as a, you know, a 4-year degree and a PhD or a master's degree. And so they need to feel as if, you know, this is something that they can do, and this is something that they should do to be functioning adults and having a great life. I mean, we're helping students get careers, make money, you know, get on their career life path, their life journeys. It's not just an English course that I didn't pass or a test that I failed. I mean, we have so many students that worry about, you know, the single grade or the points that are going to be given to them in their course, and helping them understand that, you know, it's a conglomeration. It's a, for lack of a better word or phrasing, it's a role-playing game where you have to pick up these skills, and then once you're done, you're going to go out and sort of slay that dragon, and you're going to keep slaying that dragon because that's sort of how life works, right? So that's why teaching presence is so important to me personally. Is I never felt like I was good enough to go to college. I didn't have that personal self-esteem and that belief. A lot of kids have some, you know, the good athletes, the good, you know, academic students typically come and they don't have that problem, but well over 2/3 of the students do to some degree when we look at research. So social belonging is the area that I'm most interested in terms of how it relates to students and education. And teaching presence is the biggest place that we can you know, impact that social belonging. Other questions, comments? Naomi, you said you had a lot of questions.
I do have one. It's way back from the beginning. I'm interested in, so I wrote down this idea of time on task, and you talked about time management, and that I definitely have noticed that students do need help prioritizing and managing time. And I don't know how Chickering used this idea, but one question I have about this, I guess, is how do you talk to faculty, or how as a teacher do you approach the constant tension between content coverage? So when I heard time on task, I was thinking, like, what are the students doing in class,
Right.
versus me covering this content that I have to get through. And maybe that's not even what it's about, but that's what I started thinking about. I don't know, it's a little off topic, but I wanted to get your thoughts.
Well, I think a lot of students, and I mean, you teach here, and you know, Leanne does as well. And I think we know that students just kind of procrastinate, right? That's just the nature of it. I'm gonna tackle this over the weekend. I've got other stuff, you know, busy things in my life, whether it's a work schedule or whatever. One of the things that I've done when I worked at other community colleges and helped, you know, design courses, and not just online courses, but courses that were in Canvas, that were face-to-face. I think it's very helpful, and some people feel this is kind of too nanny state, but I think it's very helpful in the modules, especially at least for the first few weeks, to give students sort of a rhythm. So like, you're going to watch these videos, or you're going to write these papers, or, You know, you're going to take this quiz, and this is how much time you should dedicate to it. You know, so if it's a video, I always tell people you know, if it's a 20-minute video, put 20 minutes right next to the link before they even click it. Or, you know, like it's a reading assignment. This should take you 2 hours. You know, we're going to have a discussion. It's going to be an hour-long discussion, you know, or, you know, a discussion board. You should spend at least an hour, between an hour to 2 hours. And the reason is because then that sort of gives students an idea of, one, setting the expectations, right? This is the clear communication about expectations. But this is also, this is how I work as your teacher, and this is the flow of the course, and this is how we iterate, right? This is what I expect of you. So if you're doing less than those things as a student, then you should expect less, you know, achievement or attainment, right? Some students are, you know, process information much more quickly than others, but there's kind of an average. And giving students that sort of heads up, one, tells them that you're thinking about them, but it also models good study behavior, you know, time. And I never knew in an English course how much time it would take me to write a 3-page paper. I had no clue, right? So I would do mine on Sundays, and I'd run out of time, and it would be terrible, and then I would fail, or I'd get a less grade than what I intended. So again, remember I mentioned reminders. So giving students reminders, and remember at the end of the week, you got a paper that's due. You should be working on it by now. You should be halfway done by now. In the online courses, again, putting those time frames in there, right? And you can even send reminders just to the whole class during the middle of the week, even if it's an online course. You know, have you done your readings for this week? Because they're pretty heavy, and you're going to need, you know, can't wait for the weekend. And again, I've, you know, gotten some pushback, you know, faculty, well, that's kind of, you know, it's not my job, but it is sort of, because I think a lot of students don't have good study habits. I didn't. I wasn't ready for college in any way, shape, or form. And it was nice when someone said, you know, this is sort of how I lay my course out. This is how it's designed, and this is how we're going to get from A to B. And I need your help as students to keep moving, you know, and you need to pay attention, you know. And students like it too. So remember, students have their own private lives, right? So if it's a video or if it's a paper and they know how much time, they can budget. Students are good at that. They check in constantly with their phones. So if I'm working at Popeye's Chicken across the street from Fort Omaha and I got a 20-minute break, and then there's a, you know, 15-minute video, well, I can check that out and I can watch while I'm on my break, right? Because I know it's 15 minutes. And then in the evening, I may review it again after I put my kids to bed. You know, this is for the returning people, you know, after I manage my dinner, I have a concept. I rewatch that video, but then I know that it's going to take me 45 minutes because you told me that's how much time I should guesstimate for writing a reflection paper or something. Those are the kinds of things of modeling the learning behaviors, time management. Those can be anecdotal stories too. Other questions? Geez, I almost talked for a whole hour. Pretty amazing.
David, your dissertation research was really interesting. I appreciate that being in there too. Thank you for putting that in.
Yeah, thanks. It's getting a little dated, but when I did it, it was some of the very first research in that direction. You know, and those things have been cited a bunch of times, those numbers and those categories. And it just, you know, really just sort of tells us that the common sense thing is that students want to hear from their instructors a lot and frequently. And the more you can do to help them with sort of those non-course related learning strategies, techniques, things that you picked up, they're going to use those. Students see education, I think, today, and maybe they did in my time, as sort of a game. I got 4 years to get through here, and I got to, weave my way through the process. And so any place that anybody can give them, efficiencies, they appreciate that. Well, Leanne, this is why we have our shell share that you contributed to, right? Is we want to have instructors talking with other instructors about what they're doing, what they're teaching, some of their strategies. Just the same as our students are looking for those hints and tips and tricks on how to be more efficient and more effective. So hopefully we'll have some more of those sessions.
I'm here for it.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. There's a lot of good stuff.
Yeah, thank you very much for listening and joining us today.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're welcome.
Thanks, Leanne. And thanks so much, David, for doing this. It's really interesting. Appreciate it.
Yeah, we can do more later.
We will. Sounds good.
All right.
Bye, everybody. Thanks.
Bye.